topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Well, hello and welcome. Bill Martinez here. Great to have you with us, sharing a part of your day. For more information on the show, you can check it out, BillMartinezLive.com. With us is Reggie Littlejohn. Reggie is a graduate of Yale Law School, worked as a litigation attorney for 8 years, founder and president of Women's Rights Without Frontiers, an international coalition to expose and oppose forced abortion, what we're calling gendercide and sexual slavery in China, and a free blind activist, Chen Guangcheng. She has testified before the U.S. Congress, at the European Parliament, British and Irish Parliament as well, and briefed officials at the White House, the United States Department of State, and the Vatican. Reggie, welcome to the show. Good to have you with us.
Thank you so very much for having me, Bill. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, I'll tell you, the topics, I should say, that we have to address are very important. We're going to focus on China. China is in the news in so many ways, and most of the time it has to do with the economy, of course, the tariff war that continues, but little is said about the gendercide and what they have done, which, when you go back historically, started with the one-child policy, which has had its great effect on the population decline in China. And of course, this has caused a ton of other cascading issues as well. And of course, the one-child policy came about in 1979, which ended in 2015. And so along with that, you got a lot of unintended consequences, right?
Absolutely. So as you mentioned, I am an attorney, a graduate of Yale Law School, and I practiced litigation for 8 years. And during that time, I represented a couple of refugees from China in their cases for political asylum in the United States. And they were both victims of the one-child policy in terms of forced abortion and also the sex and also forced sterilization.
Mm-hmm.
One of my clients had been literally picked up. She had 2 kids, so she had violated the one-child policy, and they literally picked her up and dragged her out of her home, screaming and crying, and held her down to a table and performed a tubal ligation, which is abdominal surgery,
Mm-hmm.
without anesthesia.
Oh, wow.
She ended up with a massive infection and was permanently disabled from that point forward. So that's when I left the practice of law and founded Women's Rights Without Frontiers to stop forced abortion in China under the one-child policy. So this was, in the mid-2000s.
Right.
And I don't know if you want to play our original video. It's called Stop Forced Abortion in China. But this is what was going on at the time when I founded Women's Rights Without Frontiers. And there's one graphic image in that video, which I would just, if you don't want to see a graphic image of an aborted baby, just close your eyes when I say, and I have a picture of this. Just keep your eyes closed for about 15 seconds.
Okay, let's go ahead and call that up now, Rebel.
I'm a litigation attorney, and in the 90s, I represented a client who had escaped China. I represented her in her case for political asylum in the United States, and she had been forcibly sterilized. That was my introduction to the reality behind the one-child policy. In fact, China's one-child policy causes more violence against women and girls than any other official policy on earth. I call it China's war on women and girls. When I say forced abortion, I mean women are literally dragged out of their homes or off the streets. They can be jailed in family planning jail cells, forced to abort children that they want. And this can happen all the way up to the 9th month of pregnancy. Some of these forced abortions are so violent that the women themselves die along with their full-term babies. One case that I'll never forget is of a young woman who was 7 months pregnant without a birth permit. So that would be an illegal pregnancy, who was walking down the street, and she was grabbed by family planning cadres, dragged off the street, strapped down to a table, forced to abort the baby that she very desperately wanted. And in the end, one of the medical personnel came to her with the body of her aborted baby and said, "You need to pay for this so that we can dispose of the body." And she said she didn't have any money, so they just laid that body right next to her in the bed. And I've got a photograph of her looking down and just grieving the loss of this 7-month-old baby that was forcibly aborted. It does not matter whether you are pro-choice or pro-life on this issue. No one supports forced abortion because it's not a choice. And this violence must stop. My goal in establishing women's rights for frontiers is to end forced abortion and sexual slavery in China. And to that end, I have testified before Congress. I've addressed the European Parliament, briefed the White House. When I started this several years ago, no one was talking about the one-child policy. And now, because of the documentation that has been generated, two things have happened. Number one, the Chinese Communist Party cannot deny that the one-child policy is enforced through forced abortion, forced sterilization, and infanticide. And number two, it seems that almost everybody is talking about it at this point. It's become a household issue. Stop the violence. End China's war on women. Forced abortion is not a choice.
What a powerful video. Forced abortion. This is most incredible. You say that more people are aware, but we have a long ways to go yet, because as you stated, Reggie, I mean, what has started out as infanticide has now gone its course to become gendercide. And we'll talk about that in a moment. But I want to really sit on this infanticide that's been going on in China unchecked. And I guess China is just their own protected nation in such a way that the people are silent internationally.
Well, yeah, I mean, China has infiltrated its way into the World Health Organization, the United Nations, including the United Nations Human Rights Council. So no one is, and also they have trade relationships, and also they have a debt trap diplomacy where, like in developing countries and even some developed countries, they will finance infrastructure. And then in the fine print, infrastructure meaning a railroad, an airport, a port. But in the fine print, what it says is, if you can't pay the loan back, we will own this infrastructure.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so that has enabled them to get massive infrastructure all over the world, and it keeps countries just silent about them, not wanting to confront them because they don't want China to call their debt. So China is basically unaccountable to anyone. And so when I made this video, and this was, I don't know when I made this, like 2009 or something, or maybe 2011, one-child policy was just rampant. Right now, they've gone to a two-child policy to a three-child policy, and I have called repeatedly for them to end any policy of coercive birth limits. They are actually desperate for having more babies.
Exactly.
Why are they keeping why are they saying what the current law is, which is every married couple is allowed to have 2 children, which means that legally, under their own laws, they can go and forcibly abort an unmarried woman or a 4th child. And, as a 4th child myself, I stand for the rights of 4 children to live, right? But anyway, but then when they moved to a 2-child policy and a 3-child policy, people kind of assumed that more girls would be allowed to be born, because under the 1-child policy, so many couples, they could only have 1 kid. What they really wanted was a boy,
a male, right?
A male, and so then they would, there's 2 different kinds of forced abortion that are going on here. There's forced abortion by the government, and there's what I would call gendercide. I would call that forced abortion by the culture or by the family. Mm-hmm. So with the government, if you don't have a birth permit or if you are out of policy, then they can forcibly abort you. And I think that these forced abortions have gone down in mainland China, but I think one of the reasons that they want to keep that law on the books, that every married couple is allowed to have 3 children, is to use it selectively against disfavored minorities such as the Uyghurs in Xinjiang or the Tibetans. Right. So, I mean, I can't understand any other reason that they are keeping that law on the books other than
and I'm sure they could recall your permit. You may have a permit for 3 children, but if they arbitrarily decide that, no, we say now today you only have 2.
Something that happened, Bill.
Yeah.
Okay, that happened to the Uyghurs.
Yes.
So what happened to the Uyghurs is, as a minority, they were allowed to have 3 children. And then when China went from a 1-child policy to a 2-child policy, they said to the Uyghurs, we now have a 2-child policy. We're applying this across the board, and therefore you have 3 children. So either we're fining you or we are going to put you in jail. And they have, like these Uyghur concentration camps.
Right, exactly.
Right. And one of the big reasons that people are in there is because they have 3 kids. And that is another reason that the 1-child policy, the 3-child policy, one of the many reasons that people are not wanting to have kids, especially more kids, especially where I am in the countryside, is that they could just reverse it. They could say, okay, you had 3 children when it was legal. Now we're going back to a 2-child policy. So we're gonna fine you for that 3rd child. So that there's no trust of the government. But what I wanted to say is that's the government forced abortion. The forced abortion that's by the culture or by the family is a sex selective abortion of baby girls, which we call gendercide, which even under the 2-child policy and the 3-child policy is still being practiced. So the Congressional Executive Commission on China recently came out with a statistic that said that for 3rd children, there are 133 boys born for every 100 girls born in China. So that means that there are 33 girls, aborted for every 100 girls that are born in China. About a third of the girls who are 3rd children are aborted because of their gender. Now that's officially.
So what's going to happen with these boys when they grow up and they're looking for a spouse?
Well, what has happened is that there's a massive gender disparity in China, and I've heard various estimates from 30 million to 40 million or more more men in China than women, and what that does is it creates a situation in the countryside. They have these things called bachelor villages, where the women, because they are upwardly mobile, will go to the local town or the city to marry, so that the men in the poor villages have no women at all, and that is a recipe for social unrest.
Exactly.
And then they also have sexual slavery and human trafficking, including across international lines. But anyway, with respect to the gender side, most people in China, if they have a boy, a lot of them will just say, okay, we've got our boy, we're not going to have any more kids. Then if they say, and that happened under the one-child policy. Then when the two-child policy opened up, there was one couple where they had a girl under the one-child policy. And they figured, okay, we're one and done. We've got a girl. Then it opened up to a two-child policy, and the husband said to the wife, let's have a second child. Let's have a boy. And he forced her to abort 4 baby girls in a year, and then she died. So this is the thing, is that a lot of people who are willing to go to the effort and expense of having a second child in China, they have a girl for the first child, they want a boy for the second child. And for a third child, it's very expensive to raise a child in China. And a lot of couples who are willing to go to the effort and expense of having a third child in China, it's because they have 2 girls and they want a boy. And so then those third girls are very, very vulnerable in China. So we've founded something called our Save a Girl campaign. And I'd like to show that video. It's about 3 minutes.
Okay.
According to one UN estimate, there are up to 200 million women and girls missing in the world because of sex-selective abortion and abandonment. That number, 200 million, is greater than all the casualties of all the wars of the 20th century combined. So for me, this is the true war against women. Something that people don't realize is that even under the new two-child policy, or even if there was no coercive birth control in China at all, there'd still be gendercide, because people, for whatever reason, they prefer boys over girls. After the two-child policy was instituted, there was an incident of a woman whose husband forced her to abort 4 baby girls in a year. And then she died. Women's Rights Without Frontiers is unique in that we are the only organization that has a network inside of China that is actively saving baby girls. And we've saved hundreds of baby girls in China. One story that was particularly meaningful to me was of this one woman who was being pressured to have an ultrasound. And she dragged her feet, finally went into the ultrasound, and discovered not only did she have 1, but she was carrying 2 baby girls. So even under the two-child policy, she would have used up her entire quota, and both of them would have been girls. So her mother-in-law started the pressure for her to abort those baby girls, and she didn't want to. She wanted to give birth to her daughters, and she didn't know what to do. So fortunately, our field worker found out about this and went to her door and said, congratulations on your twin daughters. Girls are as good as boys, and we're not only going to offer you 1, but we will offer you 2 monthly stipends for a year to empower you to keep your daughters. And with the encouragement and with the promise of resources, she was able to convince her mother-in-law, convince her husband to allow her to give birth to these girls. And now, of course, everybody's in love with these baby girls. They're totally adorable. And we at Women's Rights Without Frontiers believe that every girl has a right to draw breath on this earth, and that every woman has the right to give birth to her daughter. Girls do not deserve to be terminated just for the crime of being female. Our field workers on the ground in China are incredibly brave. They're flying under the radar screen from the Chinese Communist Party at great risk for themselves. They go in rain, sleet, snow, and make sure that those women get that stipend every month that helps them support their daughters. And they need our help. So I would invite you to join me in what I think is the greatest women's rights battle of our age.
Gosh, Reggie, what a powerful story. We got a question that came in. Sam asked, how do you take care of your family if you're in jail?
Wait, who's he referring to?
This was a viewer who, and
Who's jail?
she's referring to the story, said that when they come in and they arrest the families and they put them in jail,
Oh,
what happens to the children?
okay. They're talking about the Uyghur families.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what. Sometimes only the father goes to jail. And then you know what they have been doing? I've heard reports, and it's very hard to get information out of there. So they have like assigned a Han Chinese man to live with the woman. And he's a spy. And also, we believe that there's, some sexual abuse that's going on there or whatever.
I was gonna ask. That kind of sets things up there for that.
It totally sets it up, and he's spying on her and he's abusing her. It's horrible. Or if both parents go to jail, then they take the kids and they put them in an orphanage where they learn Chinese and they learn to forget their Uyghur heritage and they learn to think that the Chinese Communist Party is great. So it's a way of destroying the culture, and that's why Secretary Pompeo, under the first Trump administration, declared that the Chinese Communist Party was committing genocide against the Uyghurs. Mm-hmm. So that's what happens.
Reggie, do we have any idea? I know even here in America, we really don't have a proper count of how many abortions have taken place. Any idea as to the number of abortions that have been conducted in China?
So a long time ago, this was the Copenhagen Climate Summit. So when I say a long time ago, I think maybe 2009, somewhere in that time frame. Mm-hmm. One of the heads of the National Family Planning Association got up in Copenhagen and said that China's contribution to the fight against global warming was that they had prevented 400 million lives through the one-child policy. Wow. 400 million. And that was, at least 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago. At this point, I think it's probably closer to 500 million at this point, because the one-child policy continued for a number of years after that. Then the two-child policies, there's still forced abortion on the two-child policy. But so I would estimate that it would be maybe 500 million. And not all of them were done by forced abortion. Some were done by forced sterilization, like my client was forcibly sterilized. Some would have been done by forced contraception, and that has its own set of horror stories in it. But the way that we save these baby girls is, like I said, we are the only organization in the world that actually has a network of field workers. Now, these are not Americans in China. These are people who are from the local villages who have earned the trust of the people and found out when a mother is either pregnant with a girl or has given birth to a girl and is getting pressured by her family to give her up, or what happens. We're in a farming community, and I can't say where we are, but life is tough in China as it is. COVID made it tougher, because when COVID hit, and by the way, COVID has not gone away completely in China the way it mostly has. I mean, in the United States, it's really kind of a non-issue. But every time it hits an area, then the trucks stop, the transportation stops. So then, people's vegetables rot and they can't bring them to market and they become very impoverished. Or you would think that in China they would have socialized medicine, not so. If somebody gets sick, if somebody break their leg, whatever, they have to pay for that. If that happens to one of these farming families, they are in a state of destitution.
Wow.
And then they get pregnant with a girl. Yeah. And then pressure to give her up, give her to another family or whatever. But the mother doesn't want to. She wants to keep her daughter. So we will go there and we will offer her $25 a month for a year. And usually it's more like 2 or 3 years, to empower her to keep her daughter and to go to her mother-in-law and to her husband and say, look, I can't abandon this baby girl. She's a lucky girl. She's bringing money into the family. So that's what we do.
They see her at that point as an asset. Reggie, help our audience understand why, though you say there's really no difference between boys and girls, but yet in the culture, the Chinese culture, boys are a little bit more significant. But there's a cultural reason for that, right?
Absolutely. So, and not just in China, but also in India and also in other countries in the world, not just China, that there is an extreme bias towards boys because they carry on the family name, because they will in China, traditionally it's the boy that has to like offer the parents to the ancestors when they die. But
Right.
then the most important thing is in traditional Chinese society, when a couple marries, the young woman goes over to the young man's family and she becomes part of his family. And they
Mm.
can even end up living in the same home as his family. So there's a saying in China that um, that raising a girl is like watering somebody else's garden, because all the love, all the care, all the education, everything you've poured into that girl, you're going to lose when she gets
Mhm.
married. She's not going to be there for you when you're old. So then the young woman and the young man support his parents in their old age. And that's why they, that's one of the big reasons that
Mhm.
they prefer boys over girls.
So talk about leaving and cleaving. They really leave and cleave then.
Oh, totally, totally.
Yeah.
Um, but then one of the other things that I thought about in China was that not only are the baby girls affected, but also abandoned widows. And this is something that people
Mhm.
don't really think about. I call them
Mhm.
the invisible victims of the one-child policy. So in the same area that we were saving baby girls, we have also started saving abandoned widows. And the reasons I call them the invisible victims of the one-child policy is that, under traditional Chinese society, number one, the elderly were venerated no more. Okay, they're not venerated anymore. And then they would have a large farming family, and so their children would then have large families of their own. They're all farming, very large families, so that when the original couple got old, they would have an extended family to support them. And
Mhm.
under the one-child policy, that's not the case anymore. It's not just the one-child policy; it's also the migration from the countryside to the cities, that their kids are not there anymore. And so you have these abandoned widows in the Chinese countryside who
Mhm.
are utterly destitute and all alone and committing suicide. They have a very high suicide rate among the elderly in China, especially women in the countryside. And so we have gone to these, our field workers that are saving baby girls are also going to these widows and going to their doors and saying, we understand that you need help. So we're going to help you with $25 a month for the rest of your life.
Mm.
And
Wow.
this has been the difference, it made a huge difference, like, between being able to eat every day or not, being able to heat your tiny little room during the winter or not. So I'm wondering if we could now play the 3-minute
Well,
video.
before we do that, though, I do want to bring back this point that here it's not like you're getting USAID money. You're not
No.
getting money from the government. You're doing this out of your own foundations.
Well, what it is donations. I mean, people
Yes.
donate. So, and this is Women's Rights Without Frontiers is the only way in the world that you can actually get money into the hands of a woman who with an at-risk baby girl or an abandoned widow who has no one else to support her. So we are absolutely unique in that way.
And it's not going through the government. This is going
No.
directly to the families, right?
That's right. That's
Yeah.
absolutely right.
Mhm.
So we have a separate account called the China account, and we don't take our operating expenses out of that. All the money goes to the babies and the widows and the field.
100%, Reggie, goes.
Okay, 100% goes to the babies, the widows, and the field workers who are risking their freedom and their lives every day to get the money to them. We pay them. Okay, so but it's 100% of it goes into China.
See, that's unheard of because most foundations, I mean, even the Red Cross will hold back 25% for administrative costs.
No, we are actually funding this. Not only are we not holding back money for administrative costs, but we don't have enough money to cover the program. So we are taking money out of our general fund and putting it into, the China account to keep this program going, because we are saving lives and making a huge, huge difference.
Yeah, I can tell. Okay, let's go ahead and let's play that third video then.
China has the highest female suicide rate of any country in the world. According to statistic quoted by the State Department, 590 women a day kill themselves in China, and countless more try. China's senior suicide rate has skyrocketed over the last 20 years in conjunction with a one-child policy. In fact, it has increased 500% over the last 20 years. So there's a population of widows in China that are utterly destitute and completely lonely. They feel that nobody in the world cares for them, and they don't have resources. One of the widows that we're supporting, a couple days a week, she would eat only salt because she had no money to buy food. And she bought herself a rope to hang herself with someday when life got too tough. So we have a network of field workers inside of China. That network has been saving baby girls for years. But over the years, I've become more and more aware of elderly and completely abandoned widows in our area. So the same network that's saving girls is also saving these abandoned widows. And we go to their doors and we say to them, we understand that you need help, and so we're here to help you. And they are grateful beyond any imagination for this. The reaction for so many of them is, my own family has abandoned me, and yet people from the other side of the world are coming to my door to let me know that I'm loved and then make sure that I can eat. One of our widows said, I believe that you were sent by God in his mercy and that you're an angel. That's what she said to our field worker. It doesn't take much to make an incredible difference to somebody in the latter years of her life. And so I would invite you to join me in having an incredibly great impact on widows in China and hopefully in the rest of the world as well.
Reggie, we talk about saving a widow. What about widowers?
Yeah,
I've got to imagine, it covers both genders there. And then also the second part of the question I have for you is, I mean, you mentioned earlier, like $25 goes a long way in China. So put that in balance. First of all, let's talk about the widowers and then talk about the kind of funding and how you're able to leverage it so extensively.
Well, okay, in terms of widowers, because we're women's rights without frontiers, we picked widows to go along with baby girls. I mean,
No, that makes sense. I understand that.
So, and then in terms of,
but I can say, I know your heart though. Once you see an ailing heart, you're not looking at gender, you're looking at the heart of humanity.
Right. Well, we could consider doing that. I mean, the widowers, a lot of them are not in as bad a position as the widows because the widows are the ones who like raised the family. The widowers, are the ones who are out there in the fields and working. So they have more of a means of support than the widows. But in any case, I mean, I wish we had money to save every widow and every widower in China and in the whole world, anyone who needs help. But we have to sort of maintain our identity as an organization.
Exactly. Right.
Rights Without Frontiers. So that's why we chose widows. Right. But anyway, your second question was, how do we leverage the money? What do you mean by leverage?
Well, I'm just saying is that the amount of money goes a long way that people donate. I mean, you talked about $25 being able to be utilized over an extended period of time. If I heard you correctly, you said for a year or something?
No, $25 a month.
A month. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So what we do, our system was set up by a professional forensic accountant. And so I send money into China, and I'm not going to say how I do it. All right. Obviously.
Right.
And then the field worker there prints out the bank receipt. So I know that she received it. And then she has a list of every mother of every girl and every widow, and they have to sign that they have received the money. Okay. And then when all that happens, then she does not send it over the internet. She snail mails it to the person that is, the go-between between me and the network in China, somebody who speaks Chinese and English, and then we release the money for the next month. So we have a lot of accountability in terms of that money getting into the hands of the widows and the mothers of the babies.
Probably more than our government, I might say.
Oh, I'm sure more than our government. Absolutely.
We don't need to doge you. I got a question that came in from Francis. She says, well, didn't the government over there not think about these issues when they did the things that they did, to not realize any of this, the potential consequence of their decisions?
Something, Bill, I think they knew the consequences of their decisions. So their own demographers have been jumping up and down for decades to end the one-child policy, because it's not just about promoting gendercide and this gender imbalance, but it's also the fact that their population is imploding right now. They don't have enough young people to support their elderly. They don't have enough young women. Their labor force is going down for the first time in history. It's been going down, so they're no longer the sort of world capital of cheap labor, and people are going to other countries. So what they've done is, in order to benefit themselves economically, they've actually sort of written their own, economic suicide note.
Exactly.
This policy has completely backfired on them, which is predictable. I mean, they're trying to play God. See, this is the thing.
Exactly.
Well, they view women and men, they view people as just,
well, they're a commodity.
That people are a commodity. And if they say you can only have one child, you can sort of turn the spigot off of childbearing, and then people will only have one child. But then if you say you can have two children or three children, they thought that everybody would just jump in and just automatically have 2 children, 3 children, and bring the population back up on demand. And people are not doing it. They're not doing it, and they're not doing it for a number of reasons. One is that they've beaten it into everybody's head that one baby is the best, that people actually believe them, and now that a lot of people want to have only one child. Another reason, it's very expensive to have a kid in China, more so than you would think. And then the third reason is that, like under COVID, the Chinese Communist Party was so abusive to the society, especially with the lockdowns, that there's a movement in China called the Lie Down Flat movement. And what it means is that young people are just they have seen that everything that they worked for, everything they tried to build, was just taken away during COVID with the lockdowns. And so there's no point in putting any effort into anything. So they're going to put the minimum effort into everything just to survive, and not really try to contribute, not try to build, a dream or anything like that, and not try to have a kid. They don't want to have kids and put them into this situation, which they regard as hopeless. So that is a condemnation of the Chinese Communist Party, if there ever was one.
Well, as you said, it really is a war against God. I mean, forget about what God said. The hubris of the government is to orchestrate orchestrate this culture in such a way that these people this is not their fault. This is being done to them, but they've been conditioned to think that their government is their God. So, you go along to get along, right?
Right. And the whole thing is that, in traditional Chinese culture and in Christian culture, that they really treasured their children. They venerated their elderly for their wisdom and for all that they had contributed, over the course of their lives. And the Chinese government is completely materialistic, commodifies people, like you said. So as soon as somebody's not producing anything, they're worthless.
Right.
Right. That's
where you get into with the Uyghurs. They've been doing some organ harvesting there, and their organs, because they're of halal quality, they get more for their organs than they do for the regular Chinese people, for example.
Right. And also the Falun Gong. So, this is where you get when you don't believe in God, is that people are just commodities, and, as long as you're producing, you're okay. But, if your organs are worth more than you are, then they'll go for the organs. It's horrific. It's just horrific. But the person, that I wanted to bring up is another thing that my organization has done. This was early on. there was an activist who was saying what I'm saying now, but he's doing it from Chinese soil. So his name is Chen Guangcheng, and he was in Linyi County, and he and his wife very bravely documented forced abortion and forced sterilization in Linyi, and came out with some horrific statistic. Like they said that they thought that there's something like 291,000 forced abortions and sterilizations just in their county, just in 1 year, which if you extrapolate that out over all the counties all over China and all the years that these policies were in place, you get some astronomical number of forced abortions. But anyway, so he's been jailed. He was jailed and tortured mercilessly, and I led the international movement to free him. So I don't know if you want to play the little 3-minute video about Chen Guangcheng, but he's the real hero in all of this.
Yeah, let's go ahead and do that. We got a little bit of time here left.
Chen Guangcheng is the tank man against the one-child policy. Chen is blind, and yet it has taken a blind man to see the truth behind the brutal one-child policy. Chen is the one who exposed the fact that there were 130,000 forced abortions and forced sterilizations in Linyi County, just one county, in 2005. For that, he served a 4-year, 3-month jail sentence, during which time he was beaten, tortured, and denied medical treatment. He nevertheless possesses the surpassing backbone to stand up against this totalitarian regime. The Chinese Communist Party perceives this as a real threat to its crumbling legitimacy. In September of 2010, he was released from prison in an extremely weakened physical state. But he went to a larger prison, which was the prison of his own home. In fact, the entire village has become like a giant prison.
What we're trying to do here is to get through. This man has no authority.
那么我们现在迫切需要做的一件事情就是战胜恐惧，来揭露他们这种没有人道、没有基本良知这么一系列的见不得人的行为。这个录像的公布呢，我也有思想准备，他们可能用对付高志胜的手段来对付我，但是我不怕。
如果那个时候我和光成都会遇到一些非常危险的、不能照顾我们两个，就是我的2个孩子可有可死的话，我还是希望朋友能帮我，让我们照顾一下这2个孩子。
After the release of this video to the West, he and his wife were beaten senseless and left on their beds, unable to go to the hospital. Join in the fight to free Chen Guangcheng. Sign the petition. Send a message to the Chinese Communist Party that Chen Guangcheng and his wife must be freed immediately. And send a message to Chen Guangcheng and his family. Chen, we want you to know you are not forgotten. We are fighting for you, and we will not stop until you are free.
I love that. I am blind, but now I see. And I could probably say that for our audience before they saw what you shared with us today. We have been blind. And I pray that we now see what's going on and that our eyes are opened up to the reality of what China is doing to babies, to little girls, widows. The consequence of the one-child policy, which started in 1979, in 2015, they decided to expand it to now say you could have 2 children, and I think in 2021 or 22, they said now you can go to 3, but 3 is now leading to what you've been telling us about, gendercide. So we've gone from infanticide to gendercide, all being brought to you by central planning of the Communist Chinese government, right? Reggie, we got about a minute left, so I'm going to let you summarize and remind people how they can get involved and join with you for the cause to save these little girls.
Well, go to womensrightswithoutfrontiers.org. Womensrightswithoutfrontiers.org. There's a Chen Guangcheng page that tells more about the story of all that I did and the worldwide campaign that I ran to free him. And he's now one of my best friends, and he lives near to me in Maryland. So that's unbelievable.
Yeah.
But also on the upper right of the homepage, you can see a place that says Save a Girl in China. There's a red button. You can click on that and get more information about that. And there's another one called Save a Widow in China, and also another one called Save a Widow in Uganda, which we have not had time to discuss. But please do that. These widows and these babies, they really, really need your help. And we could expand this if we had the resources and save more babies and more widows. So thank you so much.
Well, and again, I want to remind everybody that 100% of their donation goes to help these little girls, to help these families, to help widows there in China who are suffering. And, if you can help out, I pray that you would do so and be as generous as God would lead you to be, because these are fellow human beings. I mean, in the universal picture here of God's creation, these are our brothers and sisters, Reggie.
Absolutely. And so will you put the Women's Rights Without Frontiers link down in the show notes, or maybe I can put it right here in the chat? I don't know. But anyway, yeah, that would be good.
Well, exactly. Well, again, we cannot thank you enough for coming on and telling us the story. This is so important that people understand. Even some of the comments here, people still, it's hard for them to really fully get their brain around the human abuse that's going on, because some of this defies common sense, right?
Well, it does defy common sense unless the goal is not only to control the population, but also to control people's minds and hearts through terror. The one-child policy, the family, the womb police function as domestic terrorists. So that's that. I believe that was the purpose of the policy.
Right.
One of the purposes of the policy.
Exactly. And you would think that after all these decades, they would figure this out. But like you said, this is not by accident. This is something that they've planned, that they think they know better, as we said, better than God.
Right. The Chinese Communist Party basically believes that it's God, and they persecute people who believe in God, like the Christian faith, even Hindus, Buddhists, anybody who believes in a God that's above the Chinese Communist Party will get persecuted by them because they want to occupy the role of God in the lives of their people and their nation.
And of course, we still get reports, Reggie, that the underground Christian church in China is alive and well and very vibrant.
Well, they say that the blood of the martyrs is the seed of the church. And so the more they get persecuted, the more they spread, and they can't stop it through the persecution.
Well, Reggie Littlejohn, as we close, remind everybody again the websites they can go to understand in greater capacity what's going on and how they can partner with you.
womensrightswithoutfrontiers.org. That's womensrightswithoutfrontiers.org.
Well, Reggie Littlejohn, thanks again for being on the show. We appreciate the time. Take care and be blessed.
Oh, yeah, you too. Thank you so much, Bill.
Our thanks to Reggie Littlejohn. As we mentioned, she's a graduate of Yale Law School. She's worked as a litigation attorney for 8 years. She's the founder and president of Women's Rights Without Frontiers. And what she shared with us, I know is brain bruising to understand that this is happening in the 21st century of our world. And it's happening to those that are, you could say, less fortunate, those that are reliant on a government that tells them what to do, when to do it. And let me say that what's happening in China, the way it's being ignored, you see, maybe you might be able to see some remnants or some, aspects of Chinese culture and government that is creeping here, even into the United States of America. Well, that's going to be a wrap for us. I thank you for sharing a part of your day, for being a part of the solution and not adding to the problem. And again, I encourage you to go to Reggie's website and do what you can to participate and support the cause. Thank you so much. As I said, may God bless you and may he keep you. May his peace surround you and may he be gracious unto you. God bless. Thank you.